At the beginning of 2023, I set for myself some goals for my comic book collection. Well, it's almost the end of the year, so let's sit back and take a look at some of the things that I picked up and see how I did on my list. Welcome back, comic book fans. It's Rusty again with Collector Auctions, and thanks for joining me today. I have been thinking about what I was going to do for these last few episodes for this year, and I thought a perfect way to kind of end the year a little bit here was to talk about my 2023 goals list and to see how I did this year and show off some of the things that I got, and then talk about what I still need to do to complete that list, although I don't think I'm going to finish it for the year. I definitely am not going to finish it for the year because it was a very ambitious list here. And as you can tell, I've got a lot of highlighters on here and I crossed off a lot of things. Didn't quite complete it, but it was, again, very ambitious. But I thought it'd be kind of neat to sit back. Let's go over some of the things that I have picked up this year, and I can talk about each one of them as we go along and do a little show and tell. This is things that I have been picking up this year to try to complete some of these runs. Now, some of these books and some of these runs are things that I had previously before 2023, but the goal was to try to complete a run of a certain number of books in some cases here. So it's not like I picked up everything in 2023, but a lot of it I did pick up this year, and it's been some pretty good books. And I want to just kind of show off some of the things I picked up. And the more I was looking at this, and I was talking to my wife about this, was that could be pretty long. And I think what I'm going to do is I'll probably break this up into 2 episodes. So we'll do part 1 in this episode, and then in the following episode, we'll come back, we'll finish up, and then we'll talk about the last part of the list, and then we will go over kind of what we're going to be expecting for 2024 a little bit. But guys, I hope you enjoy this kind of show and tell today. If you do like this kind of content, guys, if you haven't already subscribed, definitely hit that like button, slap the subscribe, and click on that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of my episodes. I have been putting out episodes every Monday and Friday this year at 10 a.m. And I hope you guys, if you haven't already had a chance to join in, I do live chats every day. Every time I do one of these shows, I do a live chat during the show. So definitely just join the bandwagon, guys. We went over 1,500 subs a few weeks ago, and we're going to be looking forward to bigger things in 2024. Hopefully we'll get those numbers up a lot more, and we'll see where this channel goes. I mean, I'm doing this for fun, and I hope you guys are enjoying this kind of thing. So thanks for joining me, and let's get into some of these books. All right, so first up off the list here was a book that I remember as a child. I had every one of these as a kid, read the covers off of these things. And when I say I did that, that doesn't literally mean the covers off of them, but I tell you, they are well-read books. They're readers. They're definitely readers. I still have them on my PC, and I wanted to get better copies of every one of these, and they didn't have to be 9.8. This was a book that I wanted to get just to have really decent copies in my collection, and really good storyline, and was the foundation for what ended up being the Infinity Gauntlet and the last Avengers movie. And I was just like, when I was a kid, I loved these books, and I wanted to get better copies of them. And again, I wasn't looking at them as investment grade books necessarily, unless I could find a good deal on these and I could get them in higher grades. That wasn't the case in some of these, but I basically wanted to get these in at least a 9.0. That was kind of that minimum level I was kind of wanting to get. Some of them I got better, some of them I didn't get quite there, but it's something I could work on later. But let me just show you this. This is the Captain Marvel run by Jim Starlin back in 1973. And this right here was the second issue of the Thanos storyline, the battle between him and Captain Marvel. And this is what to set the stage for everything that came after that. The death of Captain Marvel, the Infinity Gauntlet, everything with Thanos. This is where it started. Now, granted, he was in Iron Man 55 first, but this right here was his first cover appearance, Thanos, that is. And I remember this as a kid. I remember having this book. I love the way the thing was drawn here. And I always was a fan of the way that Jim Starlin drew Ben Grimm almost as much as I liked the way that Jack Kirby and John Buscema drew him. And I just remember this as very striking. And I remember, we're talking 1973. The Thing was probably the most popular member, one of the most popular members of the Marvel Universe at that point. And so, he had his own book. And this was just kind of like this. This is a crossover right here. And you got Thanos, you got Super Skrull, you've got Captain Marvel, they got Ben Grimm. Great storyline. And I had wanted to replace this. Now, I have bought a couple copies over the last couple of years, and this is my best grade I've got in this so far. I do have, excuse me, I do have an ungraded version I'm still working on cleaning and pressing that has some interesting printing defects in the red up here that I don't know if they're going to take off for that. It's a printer error. But the book looks really nice, and I'm hoping that we can get a good grade off of that eventually. But right now for the PC, I'm real happy with this for number 26. But let's just go through the rest of these real quick. Next up was 27. And this is the first issue. This became quite a key a couple years ago when the Eternals movie came out, and you had the first appearance of Star Fox, and that's him, Arrows, right there. Now, he wasn't called Star Fox right here. He was called Star Fox later in the Avengers. But the brother of Thanos, you've got the father of Thanos in this as well, and so it's ended up being quite a little bit of a key. I've definitely have overpaid for some of the raws that I've bought over this in the last couple of years. Prices have been coming down. And I think I ended up getting this from Comic Link for a pretty good price. But even today, you can get a much better price on an 8.5. I'll be looking to upgrade this at some point. The 8.5 I settled on that at the time. But moving forward, I would probably try to get that. I would definitely try to get that up to at least a 9.0, if not a little bit better. And onward was Thanos' second cover appearance right there. And you got the Avengers. And of course, this crossed over into the Avengers in issue 125 as well. And just continuing with the storyline. And none of these are keys except for that 26 and 27, really. But they're all very desirable. I got a 9.4 on this right here. This is probably one of my favorite covers of the early 70s. And if I remember right, I want to say that they used this for the Marvel Value Stamp as well. Guys, if you remember the Marvel Value Stamps, was the Captain Marvel image on this image right here? I think it was. Let me know by leaving me a comment down in the comment section below. But I was real happy on this one right here. In fact, I've got a signed version, raw copy of this by Jim Starlin. He signed that for me, I guess, about a year ago down at Heroes Con. And then we continue on with issue number 30. And again, I think a 9.4 on some of these was a really good grade. Here's issue 31. And the last one that I have is issue 33 as a 9.0. I was a little disappointed in this grade. I was hoping for a little bit better. Again, this is probably my favorite issue of all of them except for 26. Definitely want to get that grade up as well. I'd like to get that. I'd like to get all of them at least a 9.4. I think that would be right now, I think if I wanted to continue with it real hardcore, I could probably get those fairly cheap at this point. Again, the market's real down right now. Right now would probably be the time to look for those. But one of my favorite issues right there, great cover. I remember when I was in college and I was taking a class in sequential art, comic book and sequential art. Part of that was to take a page from a comic, doesn't matter where really, and just recreate it in your own style. And one of the pages, the battle scenes in here, I recreated. I should have showed that off. When I was in West Virginia last week, I should have picked that up. It's down there someplace in my old portfolio. But I reimagined the fight scene between Thanos and Jim Starlin, and it was a lot of fun back then trying to learn how to be a comic book artist, I guess. I don't have the patience for that kind of drawing and illustration, but it was still fun. But what you notice that I'm missing is issue number 32. Now, I do have a graded version of that. It is an 8.0, and I decided to take it out of this run because I wanted to, obviously, 8.5 I found somewhat acceptable, even though I still want to replace it, but 8.0 was a little too low. And I put that out, and I've actually got that up for sale on my eBay store. So I'm looking for an issue 32 that's really good, and I keep coming across it, but not quite in the condition I want. So eventually we'll get that issue 32, and we'll get a couple upgrades on a couple of these books right here, and we will complete the run of Captain Marvel issues 26 through 33, the original Jim Starlin run with the Thanos storyline, guys. Great storyline. Hope you guys get a chance to read it. I know they've collected this in a trade paperback, including I want to say it includes Iron Man 55 and the Marvel feature, I think issue number 12 as well, and I'm probably a couple other things in there as well. Just great books. Hope you guys get a chance to check out this storyline. All right, so the second run that I decided to work on this year was something I started over a year ago, and it was because I had started working on Marvel Comics Presents the Weapon X run by Barry Smith, issues 72 through 84, and I had sent in my copies of issue 72, that's the big valuable book, or at least initially it was, on this run, and it was basically I was looking to see if I could get 9/8 out of my PC. And I had multiple copies, and I was hopefully at that time, then this is over a year ago, back in 2022, I was hoping to be able to have one for the PC and then have one for that I could sell and kind of help pay for some of those orders, those CGC orders. And ended up with a 9.6 and a 9.8. And at the same time, I'm sitting there going, well, I've got all these copies, multiple copies of every one of these issues. I think it'd be interesting at the time when I started doing this, and even this was even probably back in 2021, to be honest with you. The values on these books are pretty good. If you get 9/8 on these things, I was looking at the prices and I'm going, okay, I've got multiple copies. These are good copies. Let's get some things graded. And unfortunately, a lot of the cases, I ended up getting books back at 9.6 and a couple of 9.4s. It was a learning lesson on what to get graded and what not to get graded, to be better about looking at your books and talking about pre-screens and things like that. And I ended up with a handful of 9.8s, several 9.6s, and I remember issue number 84, I couldn't get anything above a 9.4 to save my life on that. And over the course of time, over the last couple years, I kind of was like, well, this is kind of interesting. I've got a little bit of a run going here on these books, and I'm going, this would be an interesting little project to work on. Maybe it was a little bit too ambitious. Maybe there's better things, well, I guess this would have been a 13-issue miniseries, but there's other maxi series that maybe I should have worked on. Maybe I should have worked on the Watchmen run. That probably would have been a more valuable run to work on, maybe. I don't know. Have it be that as it may, I ended up starting on this because I'd already gotten several of these 9.8s, and I was finding that I could pick up some of these actually really cheap, and some of these I literally didn't pay more than $50 or $60 for off of eBay. And other ones I picked up for a little bit more than that. For every time I picked up one of these, it was definitely for below fair market value at the time of what it was. Now, of course, we're months later, and market being down, I can't tell you if the price I paid half a year ago is much lower than what it would be right now. But what I can tell you is that of the 13 issues, from issue 72 through 84, oh, is that 14 issues? I guess it'll be 14. What is it? 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 13. What? I can't figure out what I'm doing here. I've got most of these. In fact, I've only down to 3 of those. So let's just go through them real quick. So we start off with my own PC copy of 72. This is the big book out of the run. And this is the one you want to get that 9.8 on. It's amazing, a 9.6 in this. There's no value. In fact, when there's a little bit of value on this one, there's even less value on everything else in the 9.6. I mean, it is really this market. And that's going to be a theme throughout this whole show. You guys know that this year we've just seen the market come tumbling down, and even 9.8s are very affordable in just most of this run. But 9.6s, nobody wants them because why should they put the money out? They can go ahead and just get a 9.8. But 9.8 on that, 9.8 on 73. This is also, I remember this being out of the PC. And you can see I still have a little bit of that cold I had from the last episode. So you'll have to excuse me if my voice gets a little scritchy here. And then issue 74, I ended up buying, they did the John Byrne Wolverine custom label on that. And 75. And at this point, I can't remember of the ones that are remaining necessarily. I can't tell you which ones came out of the PC and which ones I ended up buying. But it's been a pretty good run. So that was 75. Now what I'm missing is 76. And this right here, 77, is always one of my favorite covers just because it was so different from all the other ones. All the other ones are very big close-ups of Wolverine, of Logan. But this one showed a little bit of that environment, and I really liked that. And then 78. And then I'm missing the next two. I'm missing 79, which has that classic Wolverine in his Weapon X helmet. And that one has actually become a pretty valuable book. And I think it's just because, I don't know if it's, I mean, it's just a cover. It's the story is the whole story is the key. But not one issue other than 72 is any more important than any of the other ones. But I think it's because of a cover from 79 that's made it valuable. But anyway, there's 81. '82. And that was a very detailed cover there, wasn't it? We've got 83, and I can tell I bought this one off of eBay as well. They did the Frank Miller custom label on this one. And that was not a deciding factor. When I'm buying books, whether it has a label or not, not really a deciding factor. I don't want to pay a premium just to have the label on there, to be honest with you. Although, when I get my books graded, sometimes I'll put the custom labels on there. But only in some cases. It's not a big deal to me to have the custom label on a book. Sometimes I think it looks really good. Sometimes I think it's unnecessary. And then lastly here is issue number 84. And I know I bought this because, like I said, I couldn't get one of mine graded above a 9.4 on this. That was really disappointing. In fact, those are the ones I'll probably just have to give away at some point. But that was it for the Marvel Comics Presents issue 72 through 84. The Weapon X storyline with Barry Windsor Smith. And just some of the most fantastic artwork you'll ever want to see. I know in one of these, I can't remember which issue it is, there's a splash page when you open it up and you have Wolverine at the top of this heap of bodies all attacking him. And the details are fantastic. It is such classic Barry Windsor Smith, especially in this late 80s. I'm sorry, 91. I keep thinking it's late 80s, but it's 91 for this series. So moving forward, I'm doing pretty good on 9/8 on all of these. I need 76, 79, and 80 to finish this run. And there you go. That's my Marvel Comics Presents Weapon X run by Barry Windsor Smith. Up next is one of my favorite books of all time, and I'm sure it's one of your all's favorite books as well. It is The Dark Knight Returns, the original Frank Miller miniseries from 1986. And I cannot add more to this book than has been written. It is one of the seminal books of Batman lore, one of the greatest comic books ever written. And I can't say much more about this. But I know that in 1986, I'm sitting there in my first year of college, second semester, and I'm sitting there going to getting Comics Journal and Amazing Heroes, and I'm seeing the advertisements for this book. and I'm going to my local Walden bookstore where they had the magazine rack, comics rack, and I'm picking up first prints of Batman #1. And I'm just sitting there, coming back to the store, or coming back to the dorm room, and I'm sitting there just in between classes, and I'm reading this book, and I'm going, oh my God, this is one of the greatest things I've ever written, or one of the greatest things I've ever read. And I'm showing it to my roommate, who is also my cousin. So, and he was like, he's one of the smartest people I've ever known, and one of the most well-read people I've ever known. And he was just blown away by this as well. And that same can go for the Watchmen as well, because they both were at the same time period, basically. But The Dark Knight Returns, one of my most favorite books, and I decided when I first started getting into CGC, I was going to pull out my books and see how I could do on those. Could I get any of those books I'd had since 1986? I mean, bagged and board, after I bought them, I bought multiple copies of each of those issues. And how did they fare over all these years? Well, I pulled them out of the bag and board, and if you guys know, the backs of these books all have this solid blue back cover, and they are very susceptible to wear. Any kind of movement will put some color rub on here. And luckily, out of my collection, out of my personal ones, I got one 9.6, and I ended up with one 9.8 that I had been able to preserve in the PC since 1986. This is my personal copy. I picked this up at Walden Books and couldn't believe I got a 9.8 out of this. I still have another raw copy in there that I looked on the back, and the front looks fantastic. But the back, boy, the color rub's all over the place. Sorry, voice is still going here. Throat's really, really raw, guys. But I got a 9.8 out of my own PC on this, and I kind of wish I had sent this in for the Frank Miller signing last year, but I was so scared to, at the time, I had never sent a book in that had already been encapsulated, and I was scared to do it, and I didn't do it on this one. I may take that chance, and there's another book coming up later that we'll talk about in the same vein. But if they do another Frank Miller signing at CGC, I would be, now that I've got a history with sending in books that have already been graded, getting a signature added to that, I've had a history with CGC being very good with the books. I have not had a disappointment on that, and I might be willing to go ahead and send this in and try to get that. But in the meantime, 9.8 on this, universal grade, fantastic. Just fantastic. That is a good thing to have in your collection. So, that leaves the other three issues, right? Well, I'll show you. I've got 9/8 on all three of these. And let's skip over 2 for a second and go through the PC, because these are PC books. 9.8 offers issue number 3, and a 9.8 off of issue number 4. All cared for all these years, from 1986 until now. I was very surprised. Now, granted, trust me, I had a bunch of other copies, especially 3 and 4. I had, at that point, I mean, Comic World was on fire with these comics. Everybody knew about this. I mean, covers of Rolling Stone, even probably Time magazine at the time. I mean, it really took the comic world by storm, and it crossed over into mainstream media. And so it wasn't just comic book people who were interested in this book. So tons of these on the stands, and I picked up multiple copies, especially 3 and 4 here. And these are both out of the PC, so I was real happy to get both of those. But issue number 2. Issue number 2, I had at least 3 or 4 copies, and I was able to get 9.6s on at least 2 of them. 2 of them I didn't think were worth grading. 2 of them got 9.6s. So this year, part of that goal was to try to get all 4 of them. And so this year, a few months ago, I finally added issue number 2 to the mix. Now, this is the first print, and that's important that you know that, because if I remember right, it doesn't, when you guys buy raws in this, it's very hard to tell if there's a first print, second print on these, because I don't think it says first print or second print. It's the color gray on the inside cover that's a little bit different, and you'll have to look it up, guys, but you've got to be careful which version it is. But being graded right now, this is guaranteed to be a first print because it doesn't say second print. It's still going to be a first print here. So real happy to finally get the 9.8 across the board on Dark Knight Returns issues 1 through 4. All right, so what better way to bookend the Dark Knight Returns as a set to get his own 9.8s than to also do it with Batman Year 1, also by Frank Miller. And that's what I did. I set a goal of getting all 4 of the Batman issues from Year 1, Batman 404 all the way to 407, as 9.8s. And what's funny is I hit this goal earlier in the year just as I made a mistake. And I know I talked about this on an earlier video, but let me show you here. We'll just go through the books. Actually, tell you what we'll do. We'll come back, we'll save the first issue, and we'll start with the second one. Issue number 405. And just absolutely stunning artwork. Dave Mazzucchelli. I hope I'm saying that right. We've got issue number... I'm sorry, that was 406, guys. This is 405. And those were the easy ones. And I'd gotten these out of my PC, and one of those was out of my PC. The other one I ended up buying. And the ones I was struggling with was issues 404 and then the last one, 407. And I finally got issue 404 as a 9.8. In fact, I got 2 of them. And I sold one of them, which was fine. I didn't need to have 2 in the PC. It helps pay for some of the hobby, right, guys? And I made a mistake. And what I did was I've got 2 selling platforms. I sell on eBay and I sell on Shortboxed. And what had happened was I had sold it on Shortboxed, and I accepted an offer on eBay, and I thought I still had the original, the first one. Turns out I'd already sold it. So I contacted the buyer and I said, look, the one that you just bought, I don't have that copy, but I do have another 9.8. It's just a different serial number, still a 9.8. And he was fine with that, and I ended up giving him my personal issue of 404 9.8, Universal Blue Grade. Just as I got back from CGC, one of the books, this wasn't from my original collection, but it was one I picked up over the last couple years and sent in to CGC. I finally, just as I got issue 407, I made that mistake on eBay, and I ended up, I've got all mixed up issue number 1, the 404. I literally, just as I completed this run, I messed it up. So here I am sitting with needing issue number 404 again, and this was getting, I want to say this was, when was this? Yeah, this was back in April. I sent in a copy of this book. I thought it was a decent copy to the Frank Miller signing at CGC to get signed. And the reason I did this was the copy that I do have a copy, a raw copy signed by Dave Mazzucchelli on the inside cover. But I've got that same copy, I've got Frank Miller on the front. It is not a gradable copy, mostly because I don't want to grade it and not be able to see the signature on the inside. But the condition wasn't the best. When I was collecting those to begin with, I wasn't thinking about getting them graded or anything. So I kind of wanted to send in a copy of this to get Frank Miller to sign what I thought was a really good copy. And it turned out to be a really good copy. It was a 9.8. And I got this back in the middle of the summer, signed by Frank Miller right there. Now, if Dave Mazzucchelli ever does a signing, I will take this and I will crack it. I'll have them crack it open, but I'll send it in for that signing as well. That would be really cool. But this turned out beautiful. This is a beautiful signature. It's better than the raw copy that I've got. He signed it with a gold pen that kind of didn't pop quite as much off the paper, but the silver on here really does. So there you go. I've got a 9.8 run of Batman Year One, and with the added bonus of Frank Miller signing the first issue of the run on Batman Year One right here. So there you go, Batman 404 through 407. Well, it seems like we're still on a little bit of a Frank Miller run right here, so let's just continue with it and go to one of his other famous miniseries that he did. Probably, I would say more famous, but just as famous as maybe Batman Year One or Dark Knight Returns was his Wolverine run with Chris Claremont. And this was a run that I sold. I had my original 4 issues, and I sold this back in 2021 early when I was looking to maybe make a little bit of money out of my collection. I wasn't really into grading at that point, and what I've found every time I sell something, I want to get it back in the PC. And I ended up a year ago finding 2 really good copies of Wolverine #1 down at Heroes Con from one particular seller. I remember buying these 2 issues, and I took both of them to the Baltimore Comic Con last year, not the one that just happened in October, but a year ago. And I took them to Baltimore Comic Con, and I had Frank Miller sign both of them. And I got them back, and the first one I opened up, beautiful 9.6 signed by Frank Miller. And I'm like, oh my God, that's fantastic. I can't believe this. This is great. But the other one, I ended up getting it out, and I'm like, oh, I was just stunned. I lost my mind. You guys probably saw it on the video when I did the reveal of this, but I ended up getting this back. Wolverine #1, signed by Frank Miller, 9.8 newsstand. And I guess the only defect is it is in a off-white to white pages, if you want to knock it for anything. But, oh my God, I was so ecstatic over this. And it's one of those I was considering selling it, but then I'm going, wait a minute, I'm working on a run of these because I'd already got issue #4 as a 9.8. And I'm going, okay, this is a project. Let's keep this. I don't want to give this up because this ends up being a pretty valuable book at this point with Frank Miller signed. And if you remember from earlier in the video when I said something about sending in to CGC and getting another adding a signature to a graded book. Well, this is one that I also didn't send in. I didn't send that Dark Knight Returns to the Frank Miller signing because I was afraid to crack it open and lose that grade. I was also equally afraid to send this into the Chris Claremont signing at CGC to get his signature added with the Frank Miller. I was like, there's no way I'm going to keep this 9.8. I was scared. I was worried that any kind of defect would knock it down. Was it worth it? Was it worth it? I don't know. Again, my history of CGC at this point over the last year and a half now of doing is sending in books that have already been graded. Some of them have already been signed. And they've done a fantastic job of keeping the books in the condition that they were when they cracked them open, adding that signature, and I kept the grade in every case. Now, that doesn't guarantee future grades, but that gives me at least a history of competence with them that I think when they don't crack us open, they do take a lot of care with your books. I mean, mistakes can happen, and they can still happen. But they do another Chris Claremont signing. I will send this in to add that to that, and that will only make this a more valuable book to keep in my collection at this point. But as you can see, as I said, I've got issue 1 and issue 4 as 9.8s. But that leaves then issues #2 and 3, and unfortunately, these are still really good. But I'm setting at 9.6s on both of these at this point. And that is something I really haven't been as aggressive over this last half year trying to find better copies of this. But I do have a couple copies in the PC that are waiting to be cleaned and pressed. I think they're really good candidates. I'll be honest with you. I think especially this issue right here, the black cover one, these are immaculate covers or copies. And to be honest, I don't know how they got 9.6s. I mean, you look at this and they're nearly flawless. And you kind of wonder if you took the chance of just cracking them open and sending them in again, would you get a better grade? It's quite possible. I don't know if I'm going to take the chance at this point. I think I would rather just find another copy and take my chances with a fresh copy and get a new book graded. But there you go. Wolverine miniseries from 1982. Issues 1 through 4. I've got issues 1 and issues 4, 9.8. Still on that goals list going forward will be issues 2 and 3 to get that 9.8. Now, guys, when you set goals lists for yourself, I mean, you could put anything you want on your lists. And I could have put anything on here. I could put any Captain America book from the whole run. There's tons of books I would love to have. And that doesn't mean that when I put a book on my list, doesn't mean that the other books are any less. It doesn't mean that I want them any more, any less than what the ones I do put on the list. I mean, but it was things that I thought that I should put on my list for right now. Next year, there's going to be a lot of different things that are going to go on that list. And for Captain America, there's plenty of keys that I probably will add at some point. And the reason I added this book right here is that I had already completed that run of especially getting them all graded, was the Steranko run from, I believe it's 1969. And you can see right here is a copy of, it's a print from issue number 113. I'm sorry, 111. And it's a reproduction. He recreated. It's not quite the same as the actual cover from 111, but I had wanted to get all 3 of those books graded at really decent grades. And I've got a copy of 111 that is a 9.4. Beautiful, just absolutely beautiful copy. I've got a 9. In fact, I got 2 9.0s of issue number 113. And one of them is even signed by Jim Steranko. But the copy that I sent in to get graded for 110, the issue with the Hulk, and the first Madam Viper and the Hydra storyline, was a real disappointment. I remember that particular order, and what I had failed to miss was that there was a water stain that ran from the back cover throughout a lot of the pages of the book, and it ended up getting a 5.0, and I was devastated. It was not what I expected, and a real disappointment. In fact, I've got it in my eBay store. I'd like to move on from it, to be honest with you. But that meant that on the goals list for 2023 was, let's replace issue 110 with a much better copy. So, and Charlotte this year at Heroes Con, that's what I did. I ended up finding a really decent copy of issue 110 here. And as you can see, it's still in the bag and the board. It is still, I got so many books in the shop waiting to go into the presses, and at some point we will get this into CGC, but this is right now, it is a much better copy than the one that I submitted before, and so I'm expecting a much better grade. And with a little bit of clean and press, we'll see what I really think about that. In fact, maybe I'll do a video when I get ready to submit the next round of some of these Silver Age books. Maybe I'll do a pre-video and give you what my expectations are, and then we can come back for a reveal at some point and show you what they really are. But for right now, goal met for 2023 was to replace issue 110. And that was it for the 2023 goals list for Captain America. I'm sitting here looking at the list, and yeah, only one Captain America book made the list this year. But that was because the other 2 Steranko books had already been on that list and had already met that goal. So there is the real easy Captain America replacement for 2023. All right, so just like Captain America, the Fantastic Four only merited a couple books on this list. And you might be wondering why. I mean, Fantastic Four, it's one of the best comic books, especially if you start putting any of those Jack Kirby and Stan Lee books, the first 100 books. I mean, how can any of those not be on your list, you might be asking? And the answer is, well, the list was already long enough, and I was trying to look for certain books that I really wanted to get. And the next year, there'll be other things on there. I'm sure there definitely will, because I've met a couple of those goals. And we'll go on. You know, your interest changes a little bit as time moves on as well. I mean, once you get the book that you want, you can kind of move on from it. You can also upgrade as well. That's a different aspect as well. But I'm sure that when we talk about the 2024 goals, I'm sure there'll be some other Fantastic Fours on that list. But let me show you what I picked up this year. And the first one here is a book I have always wanted. It's one of my favorite stories. In fact, of the first 20 Fantastic Four stories, it is probably in the top 3. It is one of my favorite stories. In fact, I probably read this story more than I read any other Fantastic Four story. I mean, for me, my favorite Fantastic Four stories early on were issues number 4 with the Submariner, issues number 5 with Doctor Doom. But this one right here holds a special place for me because I'm such a fan of time travel in stories and literature and fiction that this character has been one of my favorite characters of all time, even before the hoopla of the MCU. And I'm talking about Fantastic Four number 19 with Rama Tut, the first appearance of Rama Tut here. And I had been wanting to get a decent copy of this for a long time, and I finally ended up getting this 3.0. I think I got this off of Comic Link. I can't remember quite. But yes, it's a 3.0. But I thought this was a real respectable grade, and it was early on in the year, and the prices hadn't quite jumped down as much as they have. In fact, you could probably get this for a really decent, much more decent price than what I paid for it, I'm sure, at this point. But I was happy at any grade, as long as it was presentable, to get into my PC. And as a 3.0, I'm pretty happy with this. At some point, I'll keep my eye open to see if I can get a much better grade. I'd love to get this up to in that 7.5, God forbid the 8.0. I mean, those are still pretty expensive, but for right now, a 3.0 on the Rama Tut issue is really, really good. So I was happy to be able to pick that up and to add to the PC. But the other one is a book that I've struggled with. Last year, I went heavy on this book. I bought so many raw copies of this, trying to shoot for that 9.8 and trying to get one for the PC and then sell everything else. All I wanted was a 9.8 in this PC. Let's get rid of everything. And I'm talking about, at one point, I think I had, over the course of 2022, in the middle of the year, I probably had anywhere from 17 to 25 of copies of this issue in at CGC at one point. And lots of 9.0s, lots of 9.4s, and several 9.6s, but I never could get that 9.8. And to be honest with you, I didn't think... A couple of them had an outside shot. Those 9.6s had an outside shot, but my struggle has been going to shows, trying to find a absolutely immaculate copy of this book. And I'm talking about Fantastic Four 244, the first appearance of Frankie Ray as Nova, the Herald of Galactus. And this is a perennial hot book because we got the Fantastic Four coming to the MCU, the news of a female Silver Surfer, whether that actually is the case, or maybe they'll do Nova, I don't know. But this is a character they keep talking about coming to the MCU, and this is her first appearance as Nova, and love this issue. Loved the whole John Byrne storyline with this, and just the struggle of trying to find that 9.8 copy. I finally broke down this year, and I ended up buying a copy of this, and pretty much it was fair market value at the time. And I'm still going to have to send it in. As you can see, it's a slightly older grade. I may send this in, and actually I may get the Fantastic Four custom label on this one as well when I upgrade this, and hopefully we'll keep that 9.8. I've had a pretty good history of sending in some of these older slabs and then just re-slabbing it and retaining that grade. I've never had an experience where they've drop down a grade or anything. But I will get this back into CGC, and we'll get a new case on this, and it'll look much brighter than this, I'm sure. But I couldn't be happier about this. I just wish I didn't have to buy it. I was trying to buy the raws and use my skills in the shop, clean and press, use the tack iron, use the press, do what I can to get that book up, and I just could not find it. You find this book, if you find a book that doesn't have any spine ticks on here, guys, grab it, get it graded, because I have never found a single book out in the wild at comic shops, comic stores, any place that doesn't have at least some sort of defect on this spine over here. It is one of my white elephants. I can't find it, but I did find it right here, and so I've got that in my PC. I can knock this off and hopefully sell some of those other ones that I've gotten graded over time. In fact, they do pretty good. They sell from time to time, even lower grades. I've sold 7.5s, I've sold 8.0s, I've sold 9.0s, and I've still got a handful of 9.4s and 9.6s. It's funny, the lower grades sell better than the slightly higher grades. But still a hot book. Prices are down. This is a good time to buy. If you guys are interested in any of these as a slightly lower grade than 9.8, just look at my eBay store. I've got several of these listed at different grades. All right, guys, so the last title I'm going to talk about today is a late add to my 2023 goals list. In fact, I didn't really add this until about middle of the year in June. In fact, I started on this right before I went down to Heroes Con down in Charlotte in June. And I ended up kind of, I don't know where this came from, other than I've always had a love for the Justice Society of America. I mean, when they had their own books, when the run back in the 70s of the All-Star Comics, when they came back in, of course, with Power Girl and all the new issues, I've always found that the stories with the JSA were more interesting than the Justice League. I don't know why. I don't know why that was, but especially when All-Star Squadron, guys, that was fantastic. A lot of that stuff is Roy Thomas related, right? And there's a love of the comics, and if you look back, the artists were fantastic. You had McFarlane, and you had Ordway, and Rich Buckler, and just some really good art. And you got these characters, and somewhere along the way, I really came to really love these offbeat characters that you don't see a lot of these days. And of course, if you go back and read I had a history of reading a lot of this stuff from these characters from the Golden Age, from collections that my dad had when I was growing up. Some of the books that I had reprinted some of the original Green Lantern and Spectre and what is it? Hourman and God, I can't remember all of the characters, but there was always a love of having some of these characters. I had a little bit of history with them. So I grew up reading the reprints, and then I got to kind of grow up in the late 70s and continue on with having JSA stories. There's definitely a love for these characters. And somewhere this year, I decided, you know what? These are some really good books in the JSA back in the 60s. Let's go back and see what the crossovers were. And it turns out there was more crossovers than I had imagined. But I did pick up, the first two on the list were the major two. And the first one I'm going to show here is actually the last one I just picked up. In fact, I got this from Heritage Auctions. And it's a grade that I wish was a little bit higher. But it was a pretty good entry grade on this. And it's a really nice copy. I mean, corners are pretty sharp. There's a little bit of a dog ear on there, but the top corners, everything's very good. And here it is. I'm going to talk about Justice League of America 21. And this right here is the first crossover with the JSA and the Justice League in what was called the First Crisis, the Crisis on Two Earths. This is part 1. And when I picked this up, that was the last one of this batch that I ended up picking up. But it started with this right here. This is the second one, the Justice League number 22. And this one I did pick up down at Heroes Con this year. And Really decent copy of this. Price has fallen a little bit on this since then, but I have been able to pick up a second raw copy of this as well. I plan on getting these sent into CGC at some point, but again, I'm not too much of a hurry here, but I will get these in a CGC, and hopefully one of these I will definitely keep. One of them I will definitely have for sale. But just absolutely stunning artwork here. You've got the 2 Green Lanterns. You got the pairs of all the heroes on the cover here. You got the 2 Flashes, and there's Black Canary up there, and there's the Golden Age Hawkman with Martian Manhunter. You've got the Atom down there with Green Arrow. So just some good stuff there. The First Crisis. But that kind of led into, opened the door a little bit. What were some of those other issues that the JSA crossed over with into the Justice League? And it turns out there's a handful of books. Now, I didn't pick up everything here, but I did when I was down at HeroesCon, when I picked up at issue number 22. I also picked up issue number 29, and this is an absolutely stunning cover right here. And I remember the dealer I picked this up from is the same dealer I picked up that Captain America 110 from. And it was a small consolation that day when I picked up these 2 books, and there was one other, and I cannot remember what the third was. But I had been in negotiations with him to try to get a raw copy of Hulk 181, and we talked back and forth, and couldn't get him to bite on one of the books that I needed him to take to make the deal worth it. I didn't have enough cash on me at the time, and I needed him to buy that one of my particular graded books, and I think I could have swung that deal. But when I go to a dealer and I'm looking at books, I'm also looking at other things. So after that kind of deal fell through, I ended up making a deal, and I ended up getting this issue and that Hulk 110 and something else. I'm going to have to go back and watch the old video from HeroesCon to figure out what was the other book I bought. But this was a really nice copy. It wasn't, I mean, it's a little bit of a key, but it's not as big a key as the other 2, 21 and 22. But what a beautiful cover, right? And then since then, I had picked up a couple other issues, but the only one that I could find when I was getting ready to do the video was this one here. It is a beautiful copy of issue number 56. And you've got this battle scene right here with the JSA and Justice League. And it's funny, we talked about, one of my viewers and I talked about this copy right here as it's very similar, or issue number 130 of the Avengers. That cover is very similar to this, and we were kind of wondering if that copy of that book right there was a homage to this right here, because maybe I should, if I think about it, when I'm doing the editing of the video, I'll pull up an issue of 130 and I'll put it right next to this right here. And you guys tell me if you think it's a homage or not. It's kind of interesting. But another great JSA, JLA crossover book. And this is a trend I think I will continue, but I will start moving my title search into the late 100s, or getting close to the 100 issues and the early 100s of the JSA, or excuse me, the JLA, because I know that when I was a kid, my first issue of JLA was issue number 104, and I think that was with the Freedom Fighters. And just like the Justice League, or the JSA, there was a lot of crossover with the Justice League. So I think this will be a fun little project, sort of like my Invaders. Going back and buying some of the Invaders run, trying to complete that collection. That wasn't a goals list, I just kind of fell into it. But I think I'm going to expand my search parameters for the JLA in the Justice League books and see where I go from there in 2024. All right, guys, so that is it for today. This is not everything on my 2023 goals list. And you're probably sitting there going, wait a minute, Russ, I follow you on this channel. You're definitely not having everything on there. And it's like, yeah, you're right. There's 2 major things that I didn't put on the list today, and I'm going to show those off to you on the next episode. And that is talking about my X-Men run with John Byrne and any of the Spider-Man issues that I have put on my list and things like that. And I also didn't talk about the things that I didn't get at all. There are a few things on here that I just didn't touch this year. and we'll probably put those on the next year's list. But there's a few things left that I didn't even touch on. But in the next episode, again, we'll go over the X-Men books and the Spider-Man books that are on this 2023 goals list. But guys, let me know. Leave me a comment in the comment section. What do you think about the books today? Are these books that you would want in your PC? And do you already have them in your PC? I'd love to know. Just leave me a comment in the comment section below. And if you guys are ever interested in anything that I have on my channel or on previous episodes, just let me know by contacting me at collectorauctions@yahoo.com or DM me on Instagram. You can also check out what I currently have for sale on my eBay store or on my short box page. Both of those links are down below in the description. But that's it, guys. Thanks for joining me today. I will see you for the next episode, and remember, every comic has a story.